Welcome to That Storytelling Podcast, where ambitious entrepreneurs learn how to harness the power of storytelling. I'm your host, Ashley Renders, and today we're diving into an idea that could change your business and your life. In this episode, we'll explore 4 ways to use storytelling in your business. And trust me, it's about so much more than Instagram reels and sales copy. In the last episode, I talked about how I started this business from my car and worked to replace my 9-to-5 income over the last 5 months. If you haven't watched that video, definitely make sure you check it out because it's going to set the stage for everything that we talk about today. Today, I'm going to talk about why I decided to go all in on storytelling and how I came up with my business idea after waiting for 7 years. If you're an entrepreneur, you need to know something. This is the storytelling era. Storytelling has always played a role in business, but in today's world, it is no longer optional. The most successful entrepreneurs today aren't just sellers. They're leaders, creators, and storytellers. And they're not just building businesses, they're building movements. Stories are everywhere in business today, and they're only going to get more and more important. By the end of this episode, you'll know the 4 biggest areas where storytelling can make the biggest impact in your business and where to start using them today. Get comfortable, grab a notebook, and get ready to start thinking about how you're going to use storytelling in your business going forward. To really illustrate this, I want to go way back to 2016 when I was 30 years old and I had just left my dream job as a journalist at a huge media company here in Canada. I remember turning 29 and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I found my dream job before I turned 30. It would be so embarrassing to not have done anything really important before I turned 30. Little did I know, by the time I turned 30, I would be unemployed, living off of my savings, and starting a business that required me to look cringe every single day in front of all of my peers. It was a tough time, but I learned a lot during those years. This was 8 years ago, and I enrolled in the best of the best program to learn how to start an online business at the time. The course gave me top to bottom training, everything from creating a freebie to building a mailing list, and I invested a big chunk of my savings into this program. But it only mentioned storytelling once, and that was on the About Me page of my website. The teacher wasn't wrong. Instagram stories had just launched, YouTube was just starting to find its place in business, and Reels didn't even exist yet. The idea that you would document your life on a regular basis for your business was so new, it almost didn't exist yet. So storytelling was boxed off in the About Me page of your website. That was the only place where you could get people to know, like, and trust you. At the same time, I was posting tons of content every single day for my friends and family over on Snapchat. So I was very familiar with this idea of documenting my life and making it fun and engaging, but I wasn't doing it for the right audience. It's like there was this new wave building behind me. And because I didn't know what I was looking for, I didn't know to look back there and see, oh, there's this new thing happening where you could build your business by telling your story. And so I tried to build my business. I actually had a pretty good idea and I started working with real people. But after a while, I started to get really bad FOMO and I saw all of my friends around me getting promotions and getting new opportunities and having these really shiny careers. And I basically caved and gave up on my dream and polished up my resume and started looking for jobs again. And it was actually an incredible time in my career. I actually needed to go back to gain more skills and really build my confidence in my own storytelling capabilities. And I needed to get some vanity goals out of the way. And this whole time I was praying for a business idea so that I could jump back into the water and catch the next big wave because I felt like I had missed a social media wave. It felt like I'm too late now. Everyone's doing it. There's no room for me. There's no space for my voice until I finally just had enough. And I posted my first Instagram reel from my car, which officially launched my business. And that's what my entire last video is about. So you can go over there and watch it if you haven't already. As soon as I jumped in and I posted that that first reel, something unlocked in my brain. And I started to see that something was very different from the last time I started a business back in 2016. I started to see that storytelling was everywhere. Business owners had to tell their stories every single day. Every day, you have to put out a new piece of content. And if the story isn't good, that piece of content, whether it's a newsletter, a reel, a podcast, it's going to flop. And I saw that the entrepreneurs that were successful were telling the best stories. They were connecting, educating, and selling with their stories in such a seamless and nuanced way. And what they were saying made you want to take action. They weren't just building businesses, they were building really beautiful movements, one story at a time. This unlocked an energy in me that I have never experienced before. I realized that not only did I have a skill that was in demand, I had the skill of the time. Finally, I was at the beginning of a wave that I could catch. So let me tell you what a typical day of storytelling looks like in my business. I use it in 4 key ways, and it's so much bigger than just creating content. I know that when most people hear storytelling, they think of social media. Most people think of Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and maybe LinkedIn. Some people might also think of a podcast and their newsletter, and an even smaller group of people will think of webinars, challenges, and any kind of sales presentation that they might do in front of a large group of people. These are all amazing places to tell your story to your audience. But there are so many other places that stories show up in your business. On a regular day, I'll tell a story in an Instagram reel, and then I'll hop over to Instagram stories and I'll tell a completely different story. Usually it's one that is more relatable and it's about my everyday life, which is where I build real connection with my Instagram audience. Then maybe I'll hop into a training or a coaching call with the women who are inside of my storytelling program, and I'll tell stories there as well. Then I might script a podcast episode or a YouTube video, and I'll tell another story there. And on a really busy day, I might even work on the material for a sales event, like a webinar or a challenge, or maybe even prepare for a sales call with a potential client. All of these will also require different types of stories. And then finally, I will spend some time journaling and thinking about my own life, which is the story that I tell myself about myself. In every single one of these tasks, I'm telling stories. So let's break down each one and talk about how you can use stories all along the way that tells the story of my entire business. I rarely communicate with my audience without telling some kind of story for 2 reasons. First of all, anytime I tell a story, it's building my body of work. Every visual, every photo, every little story that I write is building up to this larger body of work. So I think of every piece of content that I put out, whether it's a reel or a newsletter or an Instagram story or a YouTube video, as one little piece in my body of work, which is telling a larger story about my business and my personal brand. The second reason that I always share a story when I'm talking to my audience is that stories have the unique ability to connect, educate, and sell at the same time. If I'm going to take the time to make a reel or write a really high quality newsletter or sit down and record a podcast, I'm going to make sure it includes a story because I want to connect with my audience. I want to make sure that they feel like they know me and they can trust me and they like me. I also want to share value. I want to educate. I want to give them something to take away with them, like a little present. Here you go. Please take this with you. It's going to help you and make you feel better. So I want to educate. And I also want to talk about my business. I'm here to share what I'm doing, build my business. I'm not just doing this to entertain or purely to connect. I'm doing it because I have something really special to offer people. Stories are the one way that I can do all 3 at the same time. And so stories are really the most powerful tool in my business toolbox. They show up everywhere and they do the most amount of work when I use them. And they're building up my personal brand. So I am telling stories all day long, anywhere I'm communicating with my audience. But stories don't stop once somebody comes into my world. As soon as they enter my program, it's not like I stop telling them stories. No. They get even more stories. I continue to tell stories as I teach and coach. I do this because I know that if I tell a story, the information that I'm sharing is going to stick because our brains are wired to learn new information through stories. For as long as we've been human, we've been sharing stories to help each other evolve and survive. Kenneth Burke, who was a famous philosopher philosopher, said stories are equipment for living. Stories are equipment that our brain has developed that allows us to live as humans. So if I'm going to take the time to teach and coach a new concept, I am definitely going to work storytelling into my content. That doesn't mean that I teach everything through stories, but I will use one or two stories inside of my training to support the material that I'm teaching. The most important thing to me in my business is getting results for other business owners. I want to make sure that if you're joining a program to learn how to tell stories in your business, that you're going to see the results that come from that hard work. And I'm really lucky because stories are the best way to do that. And that is my zone of genius. The next way that I would use storytelling in my business, if I had employees, is to lead my team. So 20 years ago, in 2004, Jeff Bezos sent out an email to his executive leadership team that said, no more PowerPoints. Why did he do this? Because he was noticing that his executives were getting sluggish and shallow in their thinking. Their ideas were lacking a certain depth that he was looking for in his executive team. And he was very smart to point the finger at PowerPoints because they allowed his team to think in bullet points. They had become so addicted to creating these massive and beautiful presentations, but they weren't taking the time to really think through their ideas and make connections between all different kinds of ideas. What did he make them do instead? To prepare for a meeting, he asked his executives to write, print out, and pass out a 6-page story. And then everyone had 30 minutes before the meeting began to read the story and digest it. And that's what he called study hall. He gave a really great explanation for why he was making everybody do this in his email. He said, the reason writing a good 6-page story memo is harder than writing a 20-page PowerPoint is because narrative structure forces better thought and better understanding of what's more important than what and how things are related. So why did he do that? He wanted people to think in multiple dimensions, and a PowerPoint presentation only allows you to think in one dimension. You only think about, what do I need to tell people? What is the list of things that I want to convey? When you think in stories, you think in the past, present, and future at the same time. And that's because a story can't really exist if a character isn't moving through time. You can't have a story where time doesn't move unless it's a very experimental story and it makes very little sense. But a classic story that makes sense and is engaging and fun to listen to starts with a beginning, middle, and end. When you tell a story, you're thinking vertically and horizontally at the same time. What do I mean by that? Vertically means that you're in the present moment and you're thinking, what is happening now? Why is this important? What do I need to tell people about what is going on in this moment? That is really what a PowerPoint is. When you're thinking horizontally, you're moving through time. You're asking yourself, what past events made this happen and what will the future consequences be if we take a certain route? So when Jeff Bezos used storytelling inside of his business, he was telling his employees, I want you to think critically. I want you to think deeply. I want you to come here with well thought out ideas. And I want us to have conversations that take the past, present, and future into consideration. And we know how that worked out for them. 20 years later, they're the 4th largest company in the world. And reports say that they still use this method in their meetings today. Rather than thinking, what do I need to tell people? What do I want them to know? Start off thinking of a time and place where something happened that illustrates the concept that you want to share with people. Making this small shift will change the way that you not only communicate with your audience, but also your clients and any employees that you work with. And that will bring so much more depth and quality to the information that you're sharing. The last place that I use stories in my business is probably one of the most important, and it's the stories that I tell myself. We are human because we can tell ourselves stories about our experiences. Storytelling is quite literally the language of humanity. Animals can't tell themselves stories about their lives. Throughout the day, our brains are absorbing millions of little bits of information, and our subconscious brain is filtering it and deciding what is most important. It ignores 99 99% of the data and latches onto that 1% that grabs attention. And what is our subconscious mind looking for? Change. Anytime our brain detects a change in our lives, for better or worse, it sends out a signal to create a story about that event. Our brain will compare what's happening in the current situation to past events so that it can make sense of it and tell itself what to do in the present to handle that change and how to handle a similar situation if it should ever happen again in the future. The stories that we create about our experiences fuel the actions that we take and the results that we get in the future. So it's incredibly important to be aware of the stories that you're telling yourself, especially as an entrepreneur, when you're focusing on results and you want to hit that next milestone in your business. Spending time with a journal to really pay attention to those stories is going to help you grow faster. It's going to keep your mindset correct. And the stories that you write about in your journal will usually inform the best content that you create for your audience. When you spend time paying attention to your thoughts, you're training yourself to notice the little things in your life and in your brain. These little things are the most relatable stories that you can tell to your audience. When you think of a great story, it's all in the little details of the scene and the character and the little thing that they do and that little thought that they keep having. Great storytelling is all about making the little things bigger. You're magnifying the little things to give them meaning. And when you spend time paying attention to the little things in your life, you're able to do that in your own storytelling in your business. This is what gives your stories depth and makes people feel really, truly connected to you. It also shows thoughtfulness and helps you stand out from the crowd because no other business owner out there is going to have the exact same thoughts and focus on the same details as you because our brains are all filtering for different information. So pay attention to what your brain filters for and pay attention to what matters to you, the thoughts that you're having on a regular basis, and use them to fuel your business. The most successful business owners are going to be thought leaders. I know that might sound a little intimidating and maybe you've never wanted to be a thought leader or that sounds like a lot of responsibility, but I guarantee you that you have thoughts that are different from other people. The thing that makes you a thought leader is valuing your thoughts, spending time reflecting on them, refining them, making them digestible, usually through a story, and taking the time to share them with other people. When you share your ideas consistently, you naturally become a thought leader in your area of business. All you need to do is look for where you are thinking differently from other people in your niche or in your industry and create a practice of sharing those thoughts consistently. This is how you can build a business on top of storytelling and on top of the experiences that you've already had and the life that you're already living. And that is a beautiful thing. Thought leadership isn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about being willing to share your perspective, even if it's a little messy, and inviting other people to explore those ideas with you. Every time you share a story, whether it's about your business, your journey, or a lesson that you've learned, you're planting the seed of thought leadership, which is the path to a sustainable business in 2024 and beyond. So start small. Share one story this week that reflects your thoughts on your industry or your niche that sets you apart from everybody else. What do you wish people were doing differently in your industry, and how did you come to that conclusion? Where did that idea come from? Thank you so much for tuning into the second episode of That Storytelling Podcast. I hope that you're excited to start weaving storytelling into your own business. Every week, I'm either going to be sharing tips about storytelling like this or a behind the scenes look at my own business. So let me know in the comments which one you prefer and what you want to see more content about. If you loved this episode and found it valuable, I would be so grateful if you would help spread the word. You can follow this podcast on Spotify so you never miss an episode. And while you're there, if you can give it a 5-star review, it would be so greatly appreciated. If you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a comment. I would love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so that you're notified every time I create a new episode. Regardless of where you're watching or listening, I would love to hear from you. What is one story that you're excited to share in your business this week? Let's keep the conversation going, and I'll see you next Friday with another episode. Have a great week.